You call that a toy? The SEAL commander went silent. After seeing her 3,247-meter sniper record, the observation platform was completely quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes when people are bored or distracted. It was the kind of quiet that happens when a room full of experienced people realize they have just seen something they cannot explain. 3 Navy SEAL commanders stood near the spotting scope. These were not easy men to impress. Between them, they had decades of combat experience, field operations, and years of watching some of the best shooters in the world do their thing. They had come to observe out of professional courtesy. Nobody had asked them to be excited. Nobody expected what happened next. Downrange, at a distance that most trained military snipers would refer to as theoretical, a distance that many would not even attempt in real conditions. A woman was lying flat on the ground. She was small in frame, but completely still. Her breathing was controlled. Her body had been in that same position for a while. Next to her sat a rifle that one of the commanders had already commented on quietly. He had looked at it when she first set up and said, almost to himself, "You call that a toy?" It was not meant as a serious insult. It was just the reaction of someone who had an idea of what a record-setting rifle was supposed to look like. And this was not it, or so he thought. Then she fired. 1 second passed, then 2, then 3, then 4. The radio crackled. The voice of the spotter came through calm and flat, almost like he was reading a grocery list. But the words he said were anything but ordinary. Impact confirmed. 3,247 meters. One of the commanders slowly pulled his sunglasses off his face. He did not say a word. None of them did. The silence stretched out, and nobody broke it, because none of them quite knew what to say. To understand what made that moment so remarkable, you have to go back to where this story really started, and it did not start on that range. It started much earlier, in a much quieter place. She grew up in a household where discipline and focus were part of the daily routine. Her father had served in the military, and even though he never pushed her toward it directly, some things just transfer. The way he moved with purpose, the way he always checked the weather before stepping outside, the way he could look across an open field and tell you, without thinking too hard, roughly how far that tree line was. She picked up that same habit without realizing it. As a young girl, she would sit by the window in the evenings and just look at things. The neighbor's fence post, the water tower in the distance, the edge of the hills on clear days. She was measuring them with her eyes before she even knew what that meant. When she first asked to learn shooting properly, the response she got was polite redirection. It was not mean-spirited. People just had ideas about who this sport was for, and a teenage girl was not exactly the image that came to mind. She was encouraged toward other activities. She tried a few of them. She kept coming back to the same question. Why not this? So she started learning on her own. She found books on ballistics, the kind written for military instructors and competition shooters, and she read them cover to cover. She did not have anyone explaining the hard parts to her, so she figured them out herself, slowly and carefully. She learned about bullet drop and wind drift. She learned about how air density changes with altitude and temperature, and how that affects every shot differently. She learned about something called the Coriolis effect, which is the way the Earth's rotation can actually pull a bullet slightly off course over very long distances. Most beginners never even hear about that. She was studying it from a borrowed book at age 16. By the time she entered her first formal training program, her instructors noticed something unusual about her. There was no nervousness in how she shot. Other beginners, even talented ones, hold tension in their shoulders. They rush the trigger. They hope. She did not hope. She calculated, and then she trusted the calculation. One instructor wrote in his notes after her first week that she shot like someone who had already done it 10,000 times. She had not, but she had thought about it 10,000 times, which turned out to be close enough. The doors did not exactly swing open for her after that. Long-range precision shooting, especially at the highest competitive levels, had always been dominated by men. The record books reflected that completely. Every major benchmark, every distance milestone, had been set by a man. When she looked at those numbers, she did not feel defeated by them. She felt curious. She wanted to understand exactly how those records had been set, what equipment had been used, what conditions existed on those days. She was not studying the records to admire them. She was studying them the way a chess player studies the opening moves of a game they intend to win. Now, about that rifle. The weapon she used became a small story within the bigger story. In the world of extreme long-range shooting, most serious competitors and military-affiliated shooters gravitate toward the big, heavy, well-known platforms. The kind of rifles that look like they mean business from across a parking lot. They are expensive, loud, and carry a certain reputation that people in this world respect immediately. Her choice looked different. It was not a small rifle by normal standards, but compared to what the serious long-range community expected at these distances, it appeared understated. It did not carry the visual weight of a record-setting weapon. When the SEAL commander made his quiet comment, "You call that a toy?" he was not alone in his reaction. Others had raised an eyebrow too. People had assumptions, and her rifle did not match them. She had heard versions of that question her entire life. About her size, about her gender, about her age, about her equipment. She had stopped answering those questions with words a long time ago. She answered them with preparation instead. Her training was almost obsessive in its detail. She kept logs of every session: wind speed, temperature, humidity, altitude, the angle of the shot, how she felt physically that day. She compared results across weeks and months, looking for patterns. She trained in bad conditions deliberately, because good conditions were a luxury, and she did not want to depend on them. She trained at high altitude where the air is thinner. She trained in crosswinds that most people would use as an excuse to pack up and go home. She trained when she was tired. She trained when nobody was there to watch, which was most of the time. The thing she kept coming back to, the principle that sat at the center of everything she did, was this: at extreme distances, the enemy is not the target. The target is just a point in space. The real challenge is the atmosphere between you and it. The wind, the heat shimmer, the pressure, the curve of the earth, the spin of the bullet as it travels. All of those forces are working on the shot from the moment the trigger breaks. A shooter who tries to fight those forces is going to lose. A shooter who understands them, who accounts for every single one before the shot, can work with them instead of against them. She became very good at working with them. The day of the record attempt came without much ceremony. She arrived at the range with her small support team, set up her equipment, and started her preparation. The conditions that morning were not perfect. The wind was inconsistent at the far end of the range. The temperature was creating some unusual air density readings. These were the kinds of conditions that give experienced shooters pause, because unpredictable variables at long range can mean the difference between a confirmed hit and a complete miss. She read the conditions carefully for a long time. She talked with her spotter, she checked her data, and then she decided she was not going to wait for a better day. She had prepared for days exactly like this one. The 3 SEAL commanders had arrived earlier that morning. They were there as independent observers, which in these situations means their job is to verify that what they see is real, that the distance is measured correctly, that the impact is genuine, that nothing about the attempt is staged or exaggerated. Their presence was important for the record to be credible. They were professional and polite, but they were clearly not expecting a particularly memorable afternoon. She fired 3 shots. The first was to confirm her ranging, to see how the bullet behaved at that specific distance under the current conditions. The second was a small correction. The third was the record. The bullet left the rifle and began its journey. At that distance, a bullet does not travel in a straight line. It arcs, it drifts, it fights gravity the whole way, and it takes several seconds to reach its destination. Those seconds feel very long when you are the one who fired it. She remained completely still. She did not watch through the scope. She had already done everything she could do. The rest was physics. When the radio confirmed the impact, the commanders did not react immediately. There was a beat where the information seemed to be processing. Then one of them stepped closer to the spotting scope, even though there was nothing more to verify. Another one looked at his colleague. The one who had commented on her rifle, the one who had called it a toy, took his sunglasses off and held them in his hand without putting them anywhere. The silence on that platform said more than most speeches could. These were men who had been in extreme situations. They knew what real capability looked like, and they had just watched someone demonstrate something they had not seen before. After a long pause, the senior commander looked at her directly and said, "That's the shot." 3 words. But coming from him, in that moment, they carried the weight of everything the silence had held. She acknowledged it with a small nod, and then went back to breaking down her equipment. She noted the conditions in her log. She talked through the shot with her spotter, point by point, the same way she always did after a session. Not to celebrate, but to understand. What worked, what she would adjust next time, what she had learned. The record was submitted, verified, and confirmed. The measurement was checked multiple times by multiple people. The distance held at 3,247 meters, just over 2 miles. The name next to that number in the official record was hers. In the days that followed, attention came from different directions. News outlets picked up the story. Military circles talked about it. The shooting community, competitive and professional, had a lot of reactions, and not all of them were immediately welcoming. A few people questioned whether the measurement was right. Others questioned the conditions. Some questioned the rifle. It was the usual pattern that follows when someone does something that disrupts what people thought they knew. The measurement was verified again. The record stood. She handled the attention the same way she handled everything else, calmly and with a focus on the details. When she gave interviews, she talked about preparation. She talked about data. She talked about understanding atmospheric conditions and how important it was to train in environments that were not comfortable. She did not talk about making a point. She was not interested in framing the record as a statement about gender or about proving anyone wrong. For her, the shot was the result of work. Nothing more complicated than that. The commander who had called her rifle a toy reached out to her personally after the record was confirmed. He apologized for the comment, which she had actually not given much thought to, and then he asked her a genuine question. He wanted to know how long she had been specifically preparing for that particular shot, meaning the attempt at that distance, under record conditions. She thought about it for a moment. Then she answered him honestly. "My whole life," she said, and that was the truth of it. Not in a dramatic way, not in the way people say things to sound deep. She meant it practically. Every hour she had spent reading those ballistics books as a teenager, every door that had been politely closed and that she had found another way through, every training session in bad weather, every log entry, every correction made, every variable studied. Every morning she had shown up to a range when nobody was watching and done the work anyway. All of it had led to that afternoon, to that rifle, to those 4 seconds of silence after the trigger broke. The thing about real records, the kind that means something, is that they are not made on the day they are set. They are made in the years before, in the quiet, unglamorous hours that nobody photographs and nobody posts about. They are made in the decision to keep going when the results are not there yet, when the doors are not opening, when the voices around you have already decided what you are capable of. She had never needed those voices to believe in her before the shot. She had done the work, and the work knew what it had built. 3,247 meters. A little over 2 miles. A bullet traveling through open air for 4 full seconds. A rifle that someone once called a toy. A woman who simply did not miss. And 3 commanders standing on an observation platform, completely silent, doing the only honest thing left to do. Recognizing something real when they saw it.